Imagine what the world would be if there were no discovery. There'd be no electricity, no radio or no TV. It's true. It could be you. So let's thank all the girls and guys who helped to open up our eyes. It's true. It could be you. It could be you. Our thanks to Daniel Bernoulli, to Madame Pierre Curie, to Leonardo da Vinci, and Julio Marconi. It's true. It could be you.
It could be you.
To see something before it's there. It's very, very, very rare. It's true. It could be you. It could be you. Knowledge that you can't resist, then you might be a scientist. So make yourself a little list and form your own hypothesis. It's true. you know it's true. And then the next thing that we see will be a great discovery made by you. Yes, it's true. It could be you. It could be you.
Inventions. Inventions. Inventions.
And here's what was on some people's mind in 1935.
What'll they think of next? Here's a combination revolver and movie camera. Stop, or I'll shoot film. And how about this? To discourage false alarms, the Cleveland, Ohio Fire Department tried this. A fire alarm with an alarming feature. It attaches itself to the user's hand. Sorry, kiddo. And ahoy there, here's a giant revolving blade its inventor claims would make the sail obsolete. He was wrong and set sail for bankruptcy court.
Police hooking car. Home inventions.
If you can tell me what any of these things are, you can win a free trip to Paris. That's Paris, Texas.
It looks like something's definitely daffy here. It's a duck wearing shoes, and they'd better be waterproof. Talk about foul play. For the soldier who has everything come these foot shoes that allow our fighting men to walk on water. Let's just hope they don't have to duck.
Look, they're peeling potatoes with no hands.
Finally, potatoes peel themselves thanks to this revolutionary product. Yes, it's another brilliant invention from the makers of the toupee that laughs at itself.
Alcohol-free car. Inventors.
Here are a few strange things that were shown in an inventor's pageant in 1939. Among them are an automatic dog feeder and an overnight dimple machine.
Ingenuity is the order of the day at the National Inventors Convention in Los Angeles, California. Here you'll see such wonders as the overnight dimple machine and the automatic dog feeder. Or combine both and prepare a delightful dinner for your dimpled Dalmatian.
Police
And from the days when cars just didn't go very fast, look at this.
An Oregon inventor says by hook, police will catch a crook. The hook locks onto the bad guy's car and brings their crime career to a screeching halt. Tough breaks, fellas.
alcohol-free car.
This might be more effective than sending people to jail.
Drunk drivers are a big problem, but is this the cure? This car senses when its driver is drunk too much and releases clouds of smoke to force him out of the car. Great! Now the driver needs to quit drinking and the car needs to quit smoking.
Mechanical swimming device.
Oh boy, who wouldn't look good in a pair of these?
Paris, France is the cradle of fashion. And here's the latest. Driving goggles complete with windshield wipers on the lenses. Here's mud, water, snow, and slush in your eye.
Driving goggles. Mechanical swimming device.
Have you learned to swim yet? Do you want to learn again?
Learning to swim is going, well, swimmingly, thanks to this device that teaches you to swim and grind coffee beans at the same time.
Mechanical swimming device. Electric hair cutter.
Now here is a creative use for electricity.
There's excitement in the air and electricity in the hair thanks to this new hair cutting technique. It certainly makes every style current.
Electric hair cutter. Electric hair cutter.
Some people believe that the first person to create chewing gum was J. Curtis in 1848, and he made it out of spruce resin from the sap of trees. Other people believe it was Charles Adams who discovered chewing gum, who flavored it with pine. Ugh, I hope he didn't use too much of the bark.
It has been estimated that almost 24 million miles of chewing gum roll out of United States factories every year.
And half of it ends up underneath tables in restaurants where I have dinner. Have you ever looked? It's disgusting.
Chewing gum. The alarm-o-bed.
Possibly one of the most unpleasant devices ever invented was the alarm-o-bed. At the set time, the bed flipped on its side and threw its startled occupant to the floor. Boy, talk about a wake-up call.
The alarm-o-bed. The easy wake alarm clock.
Patented in 1888, the Easy Wake alarm clock was one of the silliest contraptions ever invented. And you should be happy that you don't own one, right, Q?
That's right, Professor. This clock hung from the ceiling, and when it was time to wake up, a piece of the clock dropped onto the bed. The major drawback to the Easy Wake was that it sometimes knocked people out when it woke them up.
The easy wake alarm clock. Inventors.
Eli Whitney was able to look at normal objects and realize they had other potentials. He saw a clothes wringer and turned it into a cotton gin.
Whitney's invention of the cotton gin in 1793 created the immense cotton industry in the United States. Before that, removing seeds from cotton had to be done by hand and took a long time, which made it very tedious and costly.
The cotton fields are being picked faster than ever thanks to a new invention, the mechanical cotton picker.
With Eli's machine, the cotton is fed into ringers, which separate the useful fibers from the useless seeds.
He used wires as teeth to break the seeds away from the cotton. The brush swept the seeds away at the end. This is almost exactly how the modern cotton gin works.
Lots of people spent their whole lives trying to invent a cotton gin that would work, but all the other machines were damaged and the cotton took too much of the seed with it, and some of them got rusty. It was Eli's that was trusty.
Eli's gin worked, and it cut the labor of picking cotton substantially.
Plus, Eli was lucky to have a rich southern widow to support him. She allowed him to live in her home free of charge while he refined his machine, and her plantation was the first to receive one.
Science fiction writer Jules Verne is honored as one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. A remarkable series of drawings demonstrate that he wrote about inventions that didn't yet exist: the ocean liner, the helicopter, the submarine, and rockets. However, not even the great thinker Verne could imagine the garden weasel.
Benjamin Franklin. Googly.
Guglielmo Marconi was an Italian engineer who was considered to be the inventor of the radio. He had to be a radio inventor. For a name like Guglielmo, what was he gonna do, play soccer?
In 1895, after toying with wireless telegraphy for 5 years, Marconi succeeded in sending radio signals using a directional antenna. By 1897, he had formed Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company, and shortly after, he established communication across the English Channel between England and France.
Soon, Marconi's system was utilized to send signals across the Atlantic. This was a milestone in transatlantic communication.
By 1907, Marconi's system had improved so much that transatlantic radio communication was established for public use.
This meant that friends and relatives could talk to each other, even if they lived far apart. In 1909... Cube, help me!
In 1909, Marconi shared the Nobel Prize in Physics with C.F. Braun for their pioneering work in wireless telegraphy.
Years later, during World War I, he was put in charge of the Italian wireless service, where he developed shortwave transmission as a means of secret communication.
Marconi continued to study radio waves throughout his life. When he died in 1937, the radio world honored him with a 2-minute radio silence.
Unfortunately, lots of people just thought their radios were broken.
Theodore Maiman.
The American physicist Theodore Maiman was the first to discover and demonstrate a laser.
Laser stands for light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation. The first glimpse of successful optical radiation was obtained with Maiman's experimental ruby laser in 1960.
He took a ruby and silvered off one side of it. The light would then bounce back and forth inside the ruby until it became so intense, boom, it broke through, amplified, and so intense that it could cut through material. Today, lasers are used for CD-ROMs, so you couldn't be seeing me without the work of Mr. Maiman.
Alexander Graham. Charles Goodyear.
Charles Goodyear was born in 1860. He was an American inventor who discovered vulcanized rubber. That has nothing to do with the Vulcans on TV, but more to do with the tires on your car.
Before vulcanized rubber, Brazilian gum rubber was used, but it wasn't very practical. When it got hot, it turned sticky, and when it got cold, it became brittle.
Like many great discoveries, Goodyear discovered his by accident. He was experimenting on how to improve gum rubber. He found that when he heated a mixture of rubber and sulfur, the result was a stronger, more stable and more elastic rubber.
The new rubber was promoted in many ways, with products ranging from rubber balls to rubber utensils to rubber furniture.
To even this, a rubber glider, which doesn't seem like a very good idea. But if it were to crash, it could bounce back into the sky.
From our What Will They Think of Next department comes inventor Taylor McDaniel and his wreck-proof rubber glider. Government aviation experts can't believe their eyes as pilot Joe Bergling takes the rubber flying machine up in the air and then deliberately crashes it to the ground. Pilot Bergling was then taken home to his rubber room.
Unfortunately, Goodyear did not patent his secret for improving rubber, and he died a poor man.
But in case you were wondering, the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company was named in his honor.
Sure, it was named in his honor, but there's the cash.
Rob.
Born in 1882, Robert Goddard was an American physicist who paved the way for the modern rocket. In 1926, he successfully fired the world's first liquid-fueled rocket.
It was a simple pressure-fed rocket that burned gasoline and liquid oxygen. It traveled only 184 feet, but it proved that a liquid-fueled rocket would indeed fly.
Robert Goddard realized his childhood dreams by becoming a pioneer in the unexplored science of rocketry. Goddard's first great success came in March of 1926 when his rocket reached a height of 41 feet. Goddard continued his study of rocketry while he worked as a professor. His ideas were discounted by the military, but they re-emerged as the bazooka of World War II. However, all Goddard's foray into rocketry was made almost independent of government support. He dared to take a first step, and in doing so, began man's greatest adventure. Theodore Maiman, Grace Murray Hopper.
The computer compiler was invented by Rear Admiral Grace Murray Hopper in 1952. Boy, that's a tongue twister, Cube. Please tell them what a compiler does while I untie my tongue.
Computers can only understand instructions written in binary code, which consist of zeros and ones. The first programmers had to write all their programs in binary code. This was often a lengthy and tedious process.
That's why Grace Hopper's compiler was so brilliant. It revolutionized computer software because it allowed computer programmers to use special languages that resemble English more than numbers to write their programs. This made it a lot more sensible for people to become programmers and still have normal social lives.
The compiler then translated these languages back into binary code. Professor, did you know that Grace also hung a clock in her office that ran counterclockwise?
That's right, Cube. She was a very brilliant woman, and she wanted people to think that something can be done different. Just because you think it's done one way, doesn't mean the other way may not be a little bit better.
Grace Murray Hopper. Robert Goddard, Buckminster Fuller.
Buckminster Fuller was a visionary architect and inventor who is responsible for changing the way man understood structures. He designed vehicles and structures that maximized what you got out of them and minimized the natural materials necessary to build them, working in true harmony with the Earth, the solar system, and the universe.
One of his most significant innovations was the invention of the geodesic dome in 1947. Built as a sphere constructed of triangles, it enclosed more volume with less material than any other structure.
Cube, in something of this nature, it's best to show an example.
Here's one, Professor.
One of Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes has gone up on a Hollywood hillside, and there's a woman living in it.
And one heck of a smart lady, too. Beautiful. It looks like an igloo made of triangles.
Buckminster Fuller also believed that man's mobility should be limitless, so he invented things to increase it. Earlier in his career, in 1928, he built the Dynamaxion house, also called the 4D house, as in four-dimensional. The donut-shaped structure was factory-assembled and inexpensive to produce, as well as completely self-contained and movable at any time.
He also has over 2,000 patents in his name, and in some of his books, he writes beautiful poetry. Thanks, Bucky.
Leonardo da Vinci. Benjamin Franklin.
Born in Boston in 1706, Benjamin Franklin became known as a printer, a moralist, an essayist, a civic leader,
A scientist, an inventor, a statesman, a diplomat, a philosopher, a model American, and of course, He is most famous for his kite experiment in 1752. By sending a kite up into a lightning storm with the key attached to a string, he discovered that lightning, which people thought at that time was mysterious and terrifying, was actually a form of electricity.
Today, we all take electricity for granted. We walk into a room and turn on a light switch, or the TV, or we head for the refrigerator. All those things require electricity. So you can thank Benjamin Franklin next time you use a little electricity. Following his kite experiment, Franklin invented lightning rods that soon topped buildings all over America and Europe.
Lightning rods are made of metal so that they attract the lightning that comes from the sky. This way, they can make it hit the lightning rod instead of people or something important in the building. The lightning rod funnels the electricity through the rod and into the ground, where it is neutralized or grounded.
You might also have heard of the Franklin stove. Invented in 1740, it was used to heat buildings all over Europe and North America.
Franklin also had his own newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette. In it, he had really witty things to say, like this one. Early to bed and early to rise. Makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Benjamin Franklin was also a brilliant correspondent and influential politician, known for his good humor. In 1765, he became chief defender of American rights in Britain. During the Revolutionary War of 1776, Franklin became a legend among the ladies of Paris with his witty letters and anecdotes.
Benjamin Franklin was an original thinker and proposed an entirely different alphabet in 1768 to make spelling more controllable.
He thought that we should drop the letters C, J, Q, W, X, and Y, and substitute 6 totally new ones, so that every sound in the language could be expressed with just one letter.
That's not a bad idea, to tell you the truth. Franklin did lots of important things to help everybody, including the United States constitutional ratification. We are very grateful to Mr. Franklin. Plus, he's on the $100 bill. Who doesn't like that?
Henry Ford.
I invented the modern age. The first thing we know about Henry Ford is he is not a modest man. That's for sure. Born in 1863, Ford was an American industrialist, best known for his pioneering successes with the automobile. In 1903, he founded the Ford Motor Company, and in 1908, the Ford Motor Company began production of the first Model T. By 1927, over 15 million Model Ts had been sold. That's a lot of crossing your T's.
The original Model T had a detachable engine. Once removed from the car, it could be used to saw wood, pump water, and even run farm machinery. This car was a phenomenal success until 1927, when it was discontinued in favor of a newer model. You can learn more about early cars in the laboratory.
We need to make automobiles is to make one automobile just like another automobile. Just as one match is like another match when it comes from the factory. Ford is also known for introducing the idea of using standardized, interchangeable parts. You could make one car just like another car on an assembly line. With the old method, it took 13 hours to build one Model T. But using the new assembly line production method, it took only 1.5 hours. That's quite the savings. Good thinking, Mr. Ford. Unfortunately, the monotony of assembly line production got really boring, and people started getting crazy.
But this also meant that the daily wage for assembly line laborers had to rise, in part for compensation for the monotony of the job. And their wages rose from $2.50 to $5.
Compared to what Ford made, it was peanuts. When he died in 1947, he had over 600 million stackers. Thanks for sharing, Henry. I never did anything worth doing by accident, nor did any of my inventions come by accident. They came by work. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Thomas Edison was born in 1847 and was one of the most productive inventors of all time. You probably know him best for his invention of the incandescent light bulb in 1879. You can learn more about it in the lab. A lot of you may not know this, but that was not his favorite invention. Edison invented the thing that he was the most proud of when he made a phonograph.
Also among his hundreds of inventions are the movie projector and the alkaline storage battery. He is also famous for developing the world's first central electric light power station in New York City in 1882. It provided enough power to light 7,200 lamps throughout the city and led to the construction of many other central power stations.
Thomas Edison wanted to develop a wireless communication system, so he began to experiment, trying to generate vibrations between pieces of metal. Then he saw sparks. He thought he had come across something, and when he was unable to measure the electromagnetic energy, he figured he had come across a new effect, which he called, quite modestly, the Edison effect.
As it turned out, electromagnetic radiation was present, but Edison's equipment just wasn't sophisticated enough to detect it. In 1887, another scientist by the name of Hertz detected this electromagnetic energy and opened the door to radio telegraphy.
By the time he died in 1931, Thomas Edison had patented over 1,000 inventions. In 1929, a lot of lucky young boys got to meet this famous inventor. Cube, show me the pictures.
Every state in the Union sends its brightest boy to meet Thomas Edison and vie for scholarships and prizes. Mr. Edison vows to drop the evening gown competition in the future.
Okay, what do you want to talk about next? Do you want to learn about an inventor, a principle of science, a color? Come on, don't be afraid. Science is fun, and it's for everyone too.
George Eastman, Edwin Armstrong, Thomas Edison, George...
In 1888, George Eastman invented the first simple camera, and for the first time, taking pictures was easy. The camera was described as convenient as the pencil.
Eastman had realized from experience that someone needed to make a smaller camera.
George was planning an exotic vacation, and he wanted to take some pictures while he was there, so when he got home, he could bore his neighbors with his vacation shots. But when he saw how heavy the standard equipment was, he said, forget about it. I think I better make something simpler, something light.
Well, Professor, he probably should have taken that vacation because he was about to spend a lot of time in his dark rooms. In fact, his first lab was in his mother's kitchen. Years later, in 1888, he unveiled the Kodak to the public.
And I remember the slogan. It was, you press the button and we do the rest.
Eastman made the world of photography accessible to everyone. And today, although most parts of the handheld camera have been refined, the camera itself is still the same as George's original Kodak.
That's right. So when you take a picture, you can thank George Eastman. Unless it's a Polaroid. And then you can thank Mr. Polaroid.
Alexander Graham Bell, Leonardo da Vinci.
Cube, before we begin, why don't you give us a little peek at some of the things Signora Leonardo da Vinci invented?
Of course, Professor, here's one. In 1965, the Patent Office honored Da Vinci as one of the most inventive minds of all time.
Celebrating 175 years of protecting inventors, the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. honors Leonardo da Vinci as one of the greatest minds of all times.
Leonardo da Vinci is a famous artist. He is an architect. He is an engineer. He is a scientist. He grew up in Italy, in a little town called Vinci. And his name, Leonardo da Vinci, means simply, hey, he was from Vinci. He was a great painter.
As a scientist and an artist, Da Vinci understood the importance of precise observation. He anticipated a number of modern discoveries in meteorology and geology, including continental formation and the origin of fossils. He created intricate drawings that outlined how parachutes, alarm clocks, diving suits, and submarines could be built. He developed flying machines as well, and although they didn't work, he had the right idea.
That's right. Imagine thinking of things that wouldn't come to fruition for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's like one of you taking down your notebook and drawing inventions that won't be invented for hundreds and hundreds of years. Imagine writing a Stupelhucher or a Bachachel. Well, Da Vinci did it when he thought about things like parachutes and diving suits back then when no one knew. And it wasn't until Napoleon, 200 years later, that his ideas were rediscovered.
Da Vinci also made many discoveries in geology. He was the one to first suggest that many of the Earth's features were shaped by a gradual erosive process.
When he found out that there were mountains in Italy that had marine fossils, Da Vinci theorized that that meant the mountains were one time underneath the oceans. This may seem obvious to you, but this is scientific thought in its sweetest form. Go get them, Leonardo.
Leonardo da Vinci. Alexander Graham Bell.
In 1847, Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. He moved to the United States, where he taught music. He is most famous for his invention of the telephone.
And he also taught speech to the deaf.
This combined understanding of speech and musical tones helped inspire him to invent the telephone.
From the age of 18, Bell had been working on the idea of transmitting speech electrically. In 1876, he transmitted the first complete sentence.
He said, "Watson, come here, I want you." His telephone was a success, and it immediately introduced to the world. In 1877, he organized the Bell Telephone Company, and I'm still paying them today. Hello? Sorry, Mr. Bell is not here. He died in 1922.
Alexander Graham Bell. John Baird.
In 1926, using homemade equipment, John Baird succeeded in transmitting a television picture to a small screen. The picture showed a human face. Sorry, Bits, it's not you. But that's not to say you couldn't have your own sitcom. You could call it a Bitscom.
John Baird was born in Scotland in 1888. We have him to thank not just for television, but also for transmitting the first transatlantic TV signal, as well as for demonstrating color TV in 1928.
John Baird. Charles Babbage.
Charles Babbage was an English mathematician who lived in the 1800s. He is known as the father of the computer. 1800s? Did you know computers were that old?
Actually, others had invented mechanical calculating machines, but Babbage was the first to understand how a machine could perform several different calculations rather than just doing the same one. His machine was also the first that was capable of storing instructions.
Babbage decided in 1833 that he would start to build his machine. And you know what he called it? I love this. An analytical engine.
It actually had many features of the modern computer. Among these were an ability to store partial results, an ability to make choices, and a printer that allowed you to create a permanent record.
Unfortunately, Babbage died before he could finish building his computer. Some say that if he lived to be 1,000 years old, he would have never finished it. It was just too complicated for the technology that existed at that time.
Charles Babbage. Edwin Armstrong.
If you listen to an FM radio, you know the sound is nice and clear, and sometimes in stereo. That's because of Mr. Edwin Armstrong. He invented FM, and it stands for frequency modulation. So it goes from this to nice and clear. Right, Q?
That's right, Professor. Edwin Armstrong was born in New York in 1890. As an electrical engineer, he made many contributions to the development of the radio, and he patented FM radio in 1933.
Boy, I bet you he made the bundle from that one. Click on to Marconi if you want to learn more about other pioneers in the field of radio.
Scientist.
Count Alexander Volta was an Italian physicist who invented the first electric battery in 1800.
In 1755, Count Volta invented a device that could transfer an electric charge to other objects. Before this, scientists had thought that only animal tissue could conduct electricity.
In 1800, Volta's discovery of these principles led to the invention of the battery, which was a shocking situation. Napoleon was so delighted that he named Volta Count Volta, so that he could count all the batteries that he was making for Napoleon.
A volt is a unit of electric potential and was named in the Count's honor. To learn about how batteries work, you can find one in the lab.
Marie and Pierre Curie. Jonas.
The Salk vaccine gives promise in the conquest of the dreaded polio infection. Millions of hopeful parents bring their children to hastily set up inoculation centers all over the nation.
Microbiologist Jonas Salk was born in New York City in 1914. In 1953, he developed the first vaccine against poliomyelitis, commonly known as polio.
Polio is a disease that previously would cripple and even kill children.
The vaccine was injected into the body. By 1955, it had greatly reduced the number of polio cases among children and saved thousands of lives every year. Cube can show you.
A vaccination is the same thing as an immunization. It is a step in preventative medicine that makes people immune to an infection by giving them a form of the infection through a shot or in a drink.
The infection in the injection is not strong enough to make people sick, but it's there to cause antibodies to build up to attack another incoming injection that resembles the infection. These antibodies help to prevent infections. That's why you get the injection.
Galileo Galilei.
Hans Ørsted was a Danish physicist who is credited with being the first to discover a connection between electricity and magnetism.
During an experiment in 1820, Ørsted placed a wire parallel to a compass needle and then passed current through the wire. The result of the flow of electricity deflected the compass needle to a right angle with respect to the wire.
When he reversed the flow of current through the wire, the needle was again deflected to a right angle, 180 degrees opposite from where it was originally deflected.
Ørsted's work was instrumental in providing scientists with an understanding of the relationships between electricity and magnetism.
In 1642, Isaac Newton was born. He was an English mathematician and a physicist.
When you hear Newton, you probably think of gravity and picture an apple falling on his head. As one of the most influential figures of his time, Isaac Newton established principles of natural science that have dominated Western thought ever since.
In 1684, Newton had a visit from his friend Edmund Halley to discuss the planetary orbits. It was this visit that inspired Newton to refocus his scientific studies, and years later, Newton perfected his famous 3 laws of motion.
And they were: 1. A force must be applied in order to start an object into motion or to change its direction if it is already moving. 2. The amount of change in the object's motion is proportional to the amount of force applied. And 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Newton put forth these laws as well as the law of universal gravitation, and his publication entitled The Mathematical Principles of Celestial Mechanics, or the Principia Fallacia Naturalis Principia Mathematica. Whew! No wonder not many people read it. It's a very hard book to order on the phone. Yes, I'd like a copy of the Philosophia Naturalis. Never mind, I'll pick it up.
Newton's laws combined with Kepler's laws of planetary motion became the foundation for the law of universal gravitation.
And that has changed the way that we see our universe. You see, what goes up must come down. In 1869, the Russian chemist Dmitri Mendeleev developed a table that classified the chemical elements in ascending order according to their atomic mass.
This allowed scientists to establish relationships between elements that had previously been considered separate entities.
Today, the periodic table is one of the most useful tools in all of science. Plus, it makes a handsome poster.
The motivation behind Mendeleev's work on the periodic table is an interesting one. While teaching chemistry at the University of St. Petersburg, he felt that he could find no suitable book for his class, so he wrote his own.
It was called The Principles of Chemistry, and it was published in Russian, English, French, and German. While he was writing this book, he formulated the periodic law that was the basis for his periodic table of the elements.
You can find out more on the periodic table in the lab.
Galileo.
Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk whose experimental work became the basis for modern hereditary theory.
Mendel began investigating the variation, heredity, and evolution of the pea plants at his monastery's experimental garden. Between 1856 and 1863, he cultivated and tested nearly 30,000 pea plants, carefully analyzing 7 pairs of seed and plant characteristics.
This experimentation brought to light 2 very important themes, which later became known as the laws of heredity. While conducting his experiments, he also created his theories of dominance and recessiveness.
Mendel published his work in 1866, but it received no public attention. In fact, it wasn't until years after his death in 1884 that his work began to receive the recognition it deserved.
Charles Darwin. Ada Lovelace.
Believe and think not, doubt and perish. Those are the words of the great 19th century mathematician Augusta Ada Byron King, Countess of Lovelace, and one heck of a smart lady.
Ada was the daughter of the famous English poet Lord Byron. Her mother, Lady Byron, separated from her husband and took all of her children with her, including Ada. She was encouraged to pursue any endeavor that was different from her father's, so Ada pursued her interest in mathematics.
Studying on her own, she corresponded with the best mathematicians of her time. In 1830, Charles Babbage was working on his analytical engine. This was considered to be the precursor of the electric computer, even though it was only a mechanical device.
Charles and Ada met at a ball, and Ada was taken with how quickly and accurately Babbage's machine could add numbers. She became the programmer for his engine many years later.
Although the engine was never finished, Ada not only knew how to program it, but she was able to anticipate its future uses with remarkable foresight. She predicted that such a machine would someday be used to generate music and artificial intelligence.
We know this from the only paper she ever published, which was entitled The Difference Engine. Many consider her the inventor of computer programming.
Unfortunately, the rest of Ada's life was tainted with gambling debts and an illness that ended her life prematurely at the age of 36.
Today, the name Ada also refers to a high-level computer language commissioned by the United States Department of Defense in the late 1970s.
It was named in honor of Augusta Ada Byron King, Countess of Lovelace. Thank you for your greatness and your wonderful contribution to the world of computers.
Enrico Fermi.
In 1726, James Hutton was born and grew up to give us some very important ideas about geology.
Before Hutton, most scientists believed that the Earth had been shaped by a short and violent period of underground upheaval and flooding. Hutton believed the natural processes operated over a long time to mold the Earth.
To confirm his belief, Hutton observed layers of sedimentary rock. Cube, show me some examples, please.
He believed layers like these had been formed by a very gradual succession of soil deposits and geological events like earthquakes, volcanoes, and landslides.
By observing these layers of rock, Hutton developed a theory which he called the idea of geological time.
And although it seems obvious to us now, the idea that the Earth is extremely old and has been developing for millions of years was a new concept less than 300 years ago. By the middle of the 19th century, and after much debate, Hutton finally convinced some people of his theory.
We refer to this theory as uniformitarianism. That's right, uniformitarianism. Try spelling that in Scrabble. You'll have enough points to win for a year. The theory is that the geological formations on the Earth's surface developed slowly over a long period of time. This concept also later influenced Darwin in his theories of evolution.
Robert?
The British scientist Robert Hooke was the first to use the word cell. It is from the word cellular, which means, are you ready? Little room. That's so cute.
In 1665, Hooke observed slices of cork under a microscope that he had constructed and saw little compartments that reminded him of the cells found in a monastery. We now know that these miniature empty structures were the outer walls of dead cells.
About the same time, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, the great Dutch microscope maker, was using a more advanced microscope to observe cells that were found in drops of blood.
But it wasn't until 1824 that a French scientist established that all living tissue was made up of cells.
Enrico Fermi. Robert Hooke. Edmund Halley.
Edmund Halley is most famous for A. Halley Mills, B. Halley on the Mantle, or C. Halley's Comet. That's right, the famous comet Halley was named by Edmund Halley.
Edmund Halley was born in 1656. He was a British astronomer and mathematician who discovered that, like the Earth, comets orbit the Sun.
Before Halley's discovery, people thought that every comet was a brand new one. Now we know that they come back and visit on a regular basis, so maybe we should have parties for them. This is called the periodicity of the comet. If you want to know more about comets and Halley's Comet, you can find them in space.
Halley played an active role in the events of his time. And, this might surprise you, he helped to support Isaac Newton financially.
That's right. Halley was intrigued by Newton's theories, particularly the laws that applied to comets. So, Halley encouraged Newton to write his great book, Mathematica Principia, which he later published at his own expense. That was very nice of Halley, and it helped Newton to develop the Fig Newton. Just kidding.
Galileo Galilei.
In 1604, Galileo Galilei formulated his basic law of falling bodies. This law says that all bodies fall at the same rate in a vacuum.
On the Earth, if you drop a feather next to a hammer, or next to bits here, for example, bits or the hammer would hit the ground before the feather.
This is because the presence of air makes friction, and the friction slows down the feather more than it slows down bits. But on the moon, where there is a vacuum, they would hit the ground at the same time. You see?
Galileo also invented a stronger telescope in 1609. It allowed him to see mountains on the moon, as well as other objects out in space that no one had ever seen before.
One day when he was looking through his telescope, he saw Jupiter, and around it he saw moons orbiting. Aha, he said to himself, this must indicate that the Earth rotates around the sun. Boom! This led him to support Copernicus's heliocentric theory,
which said that the sun was the center of all things and that everything else revolved around it.
This got Galileo into big trouble. In 1632, he published his famous dialogue in support of his theory. And he was brought before the Spanish Inquisition. Oh, if you want to hear what happened to him, click on Galileo again.
Marie and Pierre Curie. Galileo Galilei.
In 1604, Galileo Galilei formulated his basic law.
Galileo Galilei.
Galileo Galilei was imprisoned by the Spanish Inquisition for supporting Copernicus's theory. At that time, church authorities had the power over life and death, and they supported the theory that the Earth was the center of all things.
When Galileo agreed with Copernicus that the Earth revolved around the sun and that the sun was actually the center of all things, he challenged that existing theory.
But more importantly, he challenged the church, and the church did not like to be challenged.
He was condemned to life imprisonment for publishing information that supported Copernicanism, which had been outlawed by the church in Rome. Later, his sentence was reduced to house arrest in his native village near Florence, where he was allowed to continue his research.
I'm not saying that the Roman Catholic Church bears a grudge, but they did not absolve Galileo of his wrongdoing until October of 1992. Phew, what a wait!
Galileo Galilei, Part 2. Enrico Fermi.
In 1901, Enrico Fermi was born. He was a great Italian physicist known for his role in the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was the codename for a massive, secret project that involved a huge team of international scientists all working to construct the first atomic bomb. I think we have a picture of him somewhere. Don't we, Cube? Ah, yes, that is it. That's Mr. Fermi right there.
In 1938, Enrico Fermi received the Nobel Prize in Physics for his experiments in producing radioactivity. Most of his work was done in Europe until the eve of World War II, when he escaped to the United States.
The race for the atomic bomb had begun. Once in the United States, Fermi continued doing research in nuclear fission until he demonstrated the first self-sustained chain nuclear reaction in 1942. 3 years later, he and a team of scientists detonated the Manhattan Project's first atomic bomb in Alamogordo, New Mexico.
I can show you what happened with this video.
That's a very big explosion, and the radioactivity is very bad. So please, if any of you have atomic bombs, please don't use them.
Enrico Fermi. Albert Einstein.
Born in 1879, Albert Einstein may be the most well-known scientist of the 20th century or even of all time, except, of course, for myself. Virgil reality. Ta-ta!
As a child, Einstein was curious about nature and showed a striking ability to understand mathematical concepts. Later, he found that school was taught without imagination and frequently cut classes to study physics on his own or to play his violin. He did graduate from college, however, in 1900, having studied from a classmate's notes.
Einstein won the Nobel Prize for his work on the photoelectric effect, but most people know him for the theory of general relativity and his famous formula E equals mc squared, where E equals energy, m equals mass, and c squared equals the speed of light squared. So, energy equals mass moving at the speed of light squared. It's so simple if you think of it relatively. It's simple.
Astronomers from all over the world join Albert Einstein at Mount Wilson's observatory for two reasons: to help prove the scientist's theory of relativity and to point and laugh at his hair.
Einstein was an incredible scientist with an incredible mind. Most of all, he was curious. He wanted to know more about the world around him. And he wanted to do it his way. Albert, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. It is enough if one tries merely to comprehend a little of this mystery every day and never lose a holy curiosity.
Marie and Pierre Curie. Charles Darwin.
Charles Darwin was an evolutionary scientist whose work was very important in the fields of life science and earth science.
Darwin graduated from college in 1831 and then worked as an unpaid naturalist on a scientific expedition around the world aboard the HMS Beagle. Darwin made extremely valuable observations while on the English survey ship.
He discovered, for example, that certain fossils of supposedly extinct species very closely resembled living species in the same geographical area. These observations helped Darwin to formulate his world-renowned theory, which is called natural selection. Darwin's complete theory was originally published in his book called On the Origins of the Species.
On the Origin of Species is often referred to as the book that shook the world. One of Darwin's principal theories in the book can be summed up with the phrase, the survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest referred to the fact that living organisms which survive to produce the next generation tend to embody favorable natural variations and mutations which are then passed on by heredity.
And therefore each generation adapts better than the preceding generation. Darwin stated that this gradual and continuous process was the source of the evolution of the species.
Darwin's ideas were publicly attacked by scientists and religious opponents who felt that Darwin's theories denied the existence of God. Darwin spent the rest of his years supporting his research until he died in 1882 at the age of 73.
Marie.
Cube, do you have a photo of Madame Curie somewhere in there? The Curies did most of their work in Paris and are best known for their experiments in radioactivity. Together, they lived and loved and paved the way for understanding the future of atomic energy and its enormous power.
It was the Curie's experiments with radioactivity that led to their discovery of the elements radium and polonium in 1898.
Polonium was actually named after Marie's native country of Poland.
Previous to his studies with Marie, Pierre discovered that above a certain temperature, magnetic properties disappear. It is known as the Curie temperature.
In 1903, Marie Curie shared the Nobel Prize in Physics with another physicist for discovering radioactivity. In 1911, she received the second Nobel Prize in Chemistry for isolating pure radium, making her the only woman to receive 2 Nobel Prizes.
Nicolaus Copernicus.
Nicolaus Copernicus changed our view of the universe. He was born in 1473 and is best known for his heliocentric theory, which states that our solar system has its sun at the center and not the Earth, as the Roman Catholic Church believed.
His theories were not published until after his death in 1543. Unfortunately, his ideas scared a lot of people. The heliocentric theory meant that the universe was much larger than anyone had previously thought.
Of course it scared people, because before Copernicus came along, everybody believed that the Earth was the center of everything, and everything revolved around that. But Copernicus said no, 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 and this made the Roman Catholic Church a little upset, because they said, yes, 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 the Earth is the center.
A Greek astronomer and mathematician known as Ptolemy developed a theory known as geocentrism. This theory stated that the Earth was the center of the universe and has been accepted for over 1,600 years until Copernicus came along. The Roman Catholic Church refused to believe the sun was the center of the universe.
In 1616, 73 years after his death, the Church issued an edict against Copernicus. It wasn't for many decades that they finally said, you know something, he was right.
Daniel
Bernoulli was a Swiss scientist born in 1700. Aside from being one of the first in Europe to accept the revolutionary physics of Isaac Newton, he also developed a very important principle in 1738, and we call it Bernoulli's principle.
Bernoulli's principle is important to understanding flight. His principle says that where you have a fast-moving air or liquid, you have a low-pressure situation. And with slow-moving air or liquid, you have a high-pressure situation.
This helps to explain how something as huge as a jet or airplane can stay in the air. Bernoulli's principle.
You can learn more about Bernoulli's principle if you click on the airplane in the lab.
Daniel Bernoulli. Help. Encyclopedia. Lab. Theater. Activity Center. Print shop. Activity Center.
Welcome to the Activity Center Laboratory. This is where you get to play in the professor's lab.
It's filled with wonderful experiments that utilize objects you have in your house, like pieces of paper and paper clips.
All you have to do is click on the object and follow the announcer's instructions. You can also print out each experiment by selecting Factoid's Print button.
Have fun.